Now in aerobic respiration, the first step was what? Glycolysis. In glycolysis, a molecule of glucose is oxidized. So one molecule of glucose, one molecule of glucose get converted into what? Two molecules of pyruvic acid two molecules of ATP and two molecules of NADH2 and two molecules of water. Now this pyruvic acid, two molecules of pyruvic acids gets oxidized into what? Acetyl coenzyme A. Two molecules of NADH2 and two molecules of carbon dioxide. Now there are two molecules of pyruvic acid, therefore two molecules, one molecule of pyruvic acid gets converted into acetyl coenzyme A and another molecule of pyruvic acid gets converted into acetyl coenzyme A. So there are totally two molecules of coenzyme A. पहला स्टेप जो एरोबिक रेस्पिरेशन का है वो ग्लाइकोलिसिस है. इसमें एक मॉलिक्यूल ऑफ ग्लूकोज ऑक्सीडाइज हो जाता है, टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ पायरोविक एसिड बनता है, टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ एटीपी, टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ NADH2 और टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ वाटर. और ये जो टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ पायरोविक एसिड है वो आगे ऑक्सीडाइज होकर टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए बनता है, टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ NADH2 और टू मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड. दो मॉलिक्यूल है, इसके लिए दो मॉलिक्यूल ऑफ एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए बनता है. नाउ द सेकंड स्टेप, व्हाट इज द सेकंड स्टेप? सेकंड स्टेप इज व्हाट? Tricarboxylic acid cycle. Now this acetyl coenzyme A, which was formed in the glycolysis, enters the mitochondria. So it enters the mitochondria. Mitochondria is in the cell itself, and a cyclic reaction takes place, and this cyclic reaction is known as tricarboxylic acid cycle. Now in this cycle, the acetyl coenzyme A, which is formed, only the acetyl part gets oxidized. The acetyl part gets oxidized to form what? NADH2, FADH2, carbon dioxide and water. So all this gets oxidized. So acetyl part of the coenzyme A gets oxidized to form NADH2, FADH2, carbon dioxide and water. सेकेंड स्टेप ट्राइकार्बोक्सिलिक एसिड साइकिल कहाँ पे होता है? द एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए है जो माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में आता है, और माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में बहुत सारा चेन रिएक्शन होता है, उसको बोलते हैं ट्राइकार्बोक्सिलिक एसिड साइकिल. और जो एसिटाइल पार्ट है, एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए का सिर्फ एसिटाइल पार्ट किस में कन्वर्ट होता है? NADH2, FADH2, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एंड वाटर. अभी थर्ड स्टेप, व्हाट इज द थर्ड स्टेप? थर्ड स्टेप इज इलेक्ट्रॉन transfer chain reaction. The third step is electron transfer chain reaction. This also takes place in the mitochondria only. Now all in the above steps, what all NADH2, FADH2 is formed, it takes part in this electron transfer chain reaction. So all the NADH2 and FADH2 which was formed in the above process takes part in the electron transfer chain reaction, and one molecule of NADH2 gets converted into 3 molecules of ATP, and one molecule of FADH2 forms what? 2 molecules of ATP. Plus water is also formed. अभी थर्ड स्टेप में इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसफ़र चेन रिएक्शन ये भी माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में ही होता है, और जो भी अबाव प्रोसेस में NADH2 FADH2 जो बना था वो इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसफ़र चेन रिएक्शन में पार्ट लेता है, और 1 मॉलिक्यूल ऑफ NADH2 3 मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ ATP बन जाता है, और FADH2 1 मॉलिक्यूल ऑफ FADH2 2 मॉलिक्यूल्स ऑफ ATP बनता है, प्लस वाटर भी बनता है। अब ये पूरा प्रोसेस में, ये पूरा तीनों स्टेप्स होने के बाद लास्ट में क्या बनता है? ATP, वाटर और एंड कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड। So all the 3 steps, after all this 3 steps, what is formed in the end? ATP, water and carbon dioxide. What is NADH2? Is nicotine, adenine dinucleotide. And FADH2 is what? DH2 is what? Flavin, adenine dinucleotide. Both these are what? Enzymes. They are what? Enzymes which are found in the cell, which takes part in the, they are found in the cell and they take part in the cellular respiration. तो ये तीनों स्टेप हो जाने के बाद, सब तीनों इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसफ़र चेन रिएक्शन सब खत्म होने के बाद लास्ट में क्या बनता है? ATP, वाटर और कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड। NADH2 जो ऊपर बना था वो क्या है? निकोटीन एडेनाइन डाइन्यूक्लियोटाइड, और FADH2 क्या है? फ्लाविन एडेनाइन डाइन्यूक्लियोटाइड, और ये दोनों भी एंजाइम है जो सेल में मिलता है और सेलुलर रेस्पिरेशन में टेक पार्ट करता है। ATP इज एडिनोसाइन triphosphate molecule. Now it is a rich source of energy. Energy is stored in this ATP, and this energy is stored in the phosphate group which are attached to each other, which are attached to each other by bonds. Now chemically ATP is made up of what? Chemically ATP is made up of a nitrogenous compound which is known as adenine. So this is what? Adenine, which is a nitrogenous compound. And then there is a sugar molecule, pentose sugar molecule. Pentose means what? 5-sided, which is known as what? Ribose. And there are 3 phosphate groups. Triphosphate, that is why it is known as triphosphate. So these are the triphosphate which are attached to each other by bonds. So energy is there in this phosphate group. So whenever energy is required, the phosphate group breaks down. So it becomes into what? The nitrogenous adenine, the ribose sugar, and the triphosphate now will become what? Now it will become diphosphate, because one of the phosphate group will get released, or the bond will get released from it. And energy is released. So this energy is released. So first it was ATP, that is triphosphate, adenosine triphosphate. Now it will get, when one phosphate get released, it becomes ADP, that is adenosine diphosphate, because only two phosphate is left behind and one phosphate gets released to give the energy, to release the energy. So that is why ATP is known as the energy currency. Is known as the energy currency, because it supplies the energy to our body. There is insufficient carbohydrates in our body. When there is insufficient carbohydrates in our body due to hunger or fasting, due to all this reason, there is insufficient or less amount of carbohydrates, that are lipids and proteins provide energy. Lipids get converted into fatty acid, and protein gets converted into amino acid, and these both gets oxidized to form acetyl coenzyme A, from which in mitochondria, due to Krebs cycle, it gets converted into energy. When तो अपने बॉडी में अगर कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स कम रहेगा, किसके वजह से? अगर बहुत देर तक खाना नहीं खाया तो फास्टिंग किया, तो जो लिपिड्स और प्रोटीन जो रहता है अपने बॉडी में, ये एनर्जी प्रोवाइड करता है. लिपिड्स जो रहता है फैटी एसिड में कन्वर्ट होता है, प्रोटीन जो रहता है अमीनो एसिड में कन्वर्ट होता है, और ये फैटी एसिड और अमीनो एसिड गेट्स कन्वर्टेड इनटू एसिटाइल कोएंजाइम ए, और माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया में क्रेब्स साइकिल की वजह से एनर्जी मिलता है. अभी 3 साइंटिस्ट by experimenting in the muscles, they were able to find out the process of glycolysis. What are the names of these 3 scientists? Gustav Ambedin, Otto Meyerhoff, and Jacob Parnas. Found out this process of glycolysis by experimenting in these muscles. This process is also known as EMP pathway, after the name of this scientist. E means what? Ambedin. M is what? Marov. And P is what? Parnas. Pathway. So because of this, 3 scientists doing experiment in the muscle, they were able to find out the process of glycolysis. This process of glycolysis is also known as EMP pathway after the 3 scientists. 3 साइंटिस्ट जो था वो मसल्स में एक्सपेरिमेंट करके प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्लाइकोलिसिस ढूंढा था. वो 3 साइंटिस्ट कौन है? गुस्टाव एम्बेडन ऑटो, Myra Half and Jacob Parnas. This process of glycolysis is also known as EMP pathway. Why it is known as EMP pathway? After the 3 scientists, what are that? E means Embedden, M means Myra, and P means what? Parnas pathway. Now another scientist, Sir Hans Kreb, was the one who found out tricarboxylic acid cycle. Therefore this cycle is also known as what? It is also known as Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle after the scientist. So that is why Krebs cycle means what? Tricarboxylic acid cycle. For this he was awarded Nobel Prize in the year 1953. Now, energy production in microorganism through anaerobic respiration, that is in the absence of oxygen, how is energy produced? Now there are some microorganisms which cannot live in presence of oxygen. In presence of oxygen, so they perform anaerobic respiration. For example, bacteria perform anaerobic respiration. Now in this 2 processes are involved. 2 processes are there. The first process is known as what? Glycolysis. In glycolysis, what is produced? Like the previous one only, pyruvic acid is produced. And the second step is fermentation. So only 2 steps are involved in this. In anaerobic respiration, only 2 steps are there. What are they? Glycolysis and fermentation. In glycolysis, pyruvic acid is formed, and in fermentation, this pyruvic acid gets converted into alcohol. That is an organic acid. How this pyruvic acid gets converted into alcohol? With the help of enzymes. Now it is not only this microorganism which perform anaerobic respiration. There are some higher plants and animals which do aerobic respiration and produce energy, but during certain circumstances when there is deficiency of oxygen. Then they do deficiency of oxygen in the surrounding then they perform anaerobic respiration. For example, seeds. when the seeds are submerged, the soil is submerged in water, they perform anaerobic respiration. And another example is muscles. The muscles in our body, while doing exercise, they also do anaerobic. While doing exercise, they also do anaerobic respiration. And produce what? They don't produce alcohol, they produce lactic acid. And because of this lactic acid getting accumulated in the muscle, we feel tired. Now the two disadvantages of anaerobic respiration is what? Glucose is incompletely oxidized. It doesn't get completely oxidized like aerobic respiration. Incompletely oxidized. And the other disadvantage is what? Since glucose is incompletely oxidized, so less amount of energy is obtained. Less amount of energy is obtained. Abhi energy production through respiration, anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration का मतलब क्या है? जब ये ऑक्सीजन नहीं रहता है तो एनर्जी प्रोडक्शन कैसा होता है? तो ये एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन किस में होता है? माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म, जैसे कि बैक्टीरिया होता है। ये माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म ऐसा जगह में रहता है जहाँ पे इन लोगों को कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड ऑक्सीजन के प्रेजेंस में नहीं रह पाते, दे कैन नॉट लिव इन द प्रेजेंस ऑफ ऑक्सीजन। तो ये बैक्टीरिया जो है वो एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करते हैं। जब एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन में दो ही स्टेप्स रहता है, एक तो ग्लाइकोलिसिस और दूसरा है फर्मेंटेशन। ग्लाइकोलिसिस में क्या बनता है? पायरोविक एसिड, और फर्मेंटेशन में ये पायरोविक एसिड को कन्वर्ट करता है अल्कोहल में विद द हेल्प ऑफ एंजाइम्स। तो अल्कोहल बनता है इसमें। कोई हायर प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स, जो हायर प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स हैं जो एरोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है, मतलब ऑक्सीजन के प्रेजेंस में एनर्जी प्रोडक्शन होता है, ये भी कभी कभी एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है जब भी ऑक्सीजन की कमी होता है। सराउंडिंग में अगर ऑक्सीजन कम होगा तो एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है। जैसे कि एग्जांपल्स है सीड, अगर ये सीड सॉइल में रहता है और सॉइल पूरा पानी में डूबा हुआ रहता है तो उसको ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिलता है, तो तभी वो एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है। और दूसरा एग्जाम्पल है मसल्स। एक तो एग्जाम्पल सीड्स का है, दूसरा मसल्स। अपने बॉडी में जो मसल्स है जब ये एक्सरसाइज करता है तो एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है, और जब ये एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन करता है तो इसमें अल्कोहल नहीं बनता है, क्या बनता है? लैक्टिक एसिड बनता है। और ये लैक्टिक एसिड जब ये एक्यूमुलेट होता है अपना बॉडी में तो अपन टायर्ड हो जाता है। अभी ये एनारोबिक रेस्पिरेशन का एक दो डिसएडवांटेजेस क्या है? ग्लूकोज इसमें कम्प्लीटली ऑक्सीडाइज नहीं होता है, इनकम्प्लीटली ऑक्सीडाइज होता है। सिंस ग्लूकोज इनकम्प्लीटली ऑक्सीडाइज होता है, इसके लिए लेस अमाउंट ऑफ एनर्जी ऑब्टेन होता है, तो कम एनर्जी मिलता है। नाउ प्रोसेस ऑफ एनर्जी प्रोडक्शन थ्रू aerobic respiration, not anaerobic, aerobic respiration of carbohydrate, lipids and proteins. So this is a flow chart. They do ask in the exams all this, so you have to be prepared with all these things. So now whatever we have studied that carbohydrates undergoes oxidization. The glucose in the carbohydrates undergoes oxidization by glycolysis. And the glycolysis produced, by the process of glycolysis, pyruvic acid is produced. This pyruvic acid gets converted into acetyl, oxidized into acetyl coenzyme A. and this acetyl coenzyme A undergoes a chain reaction known as Krebs cycle and gives in the end what? Carbon dioxide, water and energy. Now supposing if there is insufficient carbohydrates in our body, so if there is insufficient carbohydrates, then lipids and proteins helps in producing energy in our body. The lipid get converted into fatty acid and proteins get converted into amino acid. And fatty acids and the amino acid both get converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and in the end by Krebs cycle carbon dioxide, water and energy is produced. Now anaerobic respiration in living organism and cells, the flow chart of this. So glucose undergoes glycolysis process, and produces pyruvic acid, and this pyruvic acid undergoes fermentation. We have studied last year fermentation. From fermentation we can produce different products. Like vinegar, vitamins, etc. Similarly, we can produce various microbes also. Now this was in the case of the production of vinegar vitamins. Now in case of microorganisms like yeast, here also pyruvic acid undergoes fermentation, and what is produced over here? Alcohol is produced. And same way in the case of muscles, erythrocyte cells that is muscles, in the muscles. So in the muscles also pyruvic acid undergoes anaerobic respiration, and then fermentation. After fermentation, what is produced? Lactic acid is produced, which gets accumulated in our muscles and we feel tired. So in case of yeast, alcohol is produced after fermentation, and in case of muscle, lactic acid is produced after fermentation.